Welcome to the film, Where in the World Are We? An Artist's Journey. I am Jane Lundgren.
And I'm Mark Lundgren, and we are the owners of Illume Gallery West, located here in beautiful Philipsburg, Montana.
We have both spent our lives immersed in the arts, dancing, acting, singing, art collecting. We have loved the visual arts.
I will leave the singing and dancing to Jane, but I have been involved in collecting art, and so has she from a very young age, which has led us to own art galleries for the last 20 years in Salt Lake and St. George, and now in Philipsburg, Montana, at our flagship gallery.
Mark and I are blessed to represent a number of the most accomplished and talented artists in the United States. These are artists who throw everything into their work, their light, their energy, their talent, into every piece they paint, every piece they sculpt. It has their personal energy in it. They're awesome.
Well, over the years, as I've known most of the artists and worked with them, they are incredible individuals. Not only are they excellent at the work that they do, they are fantastic people. And it's true, when their art is in your home, part of their spirit is in your home too. An original painting or a sculpture has a life in it that you can't get with a print.
In each of the last 9 years, our galleries have presented a show, Where in the World Are We? They painted wherever they were and sent their paintings in. This year, we have a spin on it. Where in the World Are We? Is in Philipsburg, Montana at our ranch. They spent an incredible few days at an artist retreat, getting to know each other, intermingling with each other. It was a blast. When you gather a group of artists, they go from a stable of artists to a family of artists. These artists loved being together. The camaraderie was so wonderful. They shared with each other. They shared ideas. They showed different places to paint. They had times of quiet, times of levity. It was a wonderful 2 days. And also, they were out in the wilds of Montana. Mark especially had an opportunity to take a lot of them.
Well, some of them are from rural areas or from the mountains, and so they're familiar with the trees and the four-wheelers and the lakes and the fishing, and others were from the big city, so this was a new experience for them. But it was beautiful. They all enjoyed it thoroughly, and they got to be around cows and cow dogs and cowboys, and it was a lot of fun.
At the end of this incredible experience, they were able to take their inspiration, their ideas, their sketches, their molds to their own personal studios, and in the next 2 months created magnificent pieces that are making their way into the gallery. Mark has been spending a lot of time hanging.
Well, we've hung all of the art, and the auction will go live November 3rd through the 13th, both online and in person.
The other half of the gallery business is connecting the artists with the collectors. Having just the perfect piece go home with the collector is so elating. It's thrilling to me. I know that will go and lift their home. And when people walk in the gallery and there are so many pieces like that, they're overwhelmed. They ask, what is it that's in here? Why do I feel this way? People come just for that feeling. It's amazing.
That's true. They do break down in tears quite often, and it's sort of interesting to see them enjoy the art so much and feel the power and the spirit that's in each individual piece.
Now enjoy the movie and share in our experiences. You will glimpse an understanding of an artist's journey.
Illume Gallery West presents a HoverPix film. A select group of nationally renowned artists have come together on this picturesque ranch in Philipsburg, Montana. Each painter and sculptor will be immersed in the incredible beauty for the next 2 days. The artist's unique perspective will show how they approach the creative process, from the spark of an idea to a completed masterpiece.
Plein air painting is awful momentary, but the momentary really is about the eternal. I think it's more about the things we can't see than the things that we can see. As I do my art, I'm not really thinking about imitating what's there. I'm thinking about the spirit of what's underneath it. It's hard to force a painting, so you just kind of have to let it come to you. Shadows are important to me. They kind of define a subject and make it more dramatic. And what usually happens is if I'm out hunting for something, I can hunt all day, but you just pass something by and you go, there it is. And that's when you take advantage of it.
This is not quite painter's gear, but it's my painter's gear. There are several different species of fish in this creek, and you catch a really pretty little cutthroat trout and drag it out onto a pretty wet stone or something. And then I take a photograph of it looking down on it, and it makes a really nice subject to try to convert into paint. Hopefully they will cooperate.
One thing that is really drawing me is this valley. I love the atmosphere and the depth of it, especially in the morning when you get backlight. It kind of really accentuates that kind of watery atmosphere. So that's going to be one thing that is going to be a huge draw. And obviously we've got the cowboy and the horse behind us. It just adds that idea of freedom to the whole scene. And once I feel drawn to a certain spot, then it's a matter of analyzing, okay, compositionally, what would I do here?
There's an awesome little shack over there with purple flowers and yellow flowers, and it's just a great little scene. So this morning, that shack doesn't look very interesting, but this afternoon it's gonna look better. So it's all about light and atmosphere to me.
Leaning towards the idea of doing some sort of big landscape, but I don't do that a lot, so I think, I don't know, I think I'm really kind of leaning into doing a figure.
Being from California, I paint mostly golden rolling hills, oak trees, and our the seaside. For me, it's going to be trying to understand the depth of field here, and what I do love is all the rhythms that are happening with the pines and the rhythms of the hills, the foothills here.
What I love is the human figure, and especially most of my work revolves around the female figure. That seems to be just what lends to the voice I want to have with my artwork. But when I'm trying to come up with something, with an idea, with a composition, I want to be as flexible as possible. So I leave everything extra long. I'll start trimming things and cutting the actual wire as I start adding clay, and like, okay, this is starting to work, and it will grow into hopefully what I kind of have in my mind. I want to make something that the viewer wants to walk around underneath, over the top of. I want to make something that's beautiful. But what draws me in personally is representational art as well. So I do push beyond the abstract and turn it into usually a recognizable figure. I kind of have this thought in my head, and I want to see if I can pull it off.
Mark is actually going to take me up a couple miles up the mountain, and so we're about ready to head up there and see what's going on. What I look for are storylines and scenes that trigger my imagination. It's either going to be mountain men or Native Americans particularly, or old-time cowboys, or I look for beautiful situations of light, or sometimes really intimate settings, and water is always great. You can have people coming through water. I can photograph or work with somebody in a field and put them in a stream when I paint them. You know, I'm very flexible with constructing my paintings, especially as they get more complex. And sometimes I'll sit, I don't do a lot of plein air, but I do it sometimes just for the fun of it. And I'll sit out and maybe do color studies, or just sort of have some fun and challenge myself with how do you render something so complex and intensely beautiful. That's the challenge for all landscape painters, of course.
This is the perfect mountain lake. There's even little lily pads in there. 50 different compositions right here in this one little spot. And the light and shadow is so incredible.
The lead-in of this space, the way the pond comes in and then the darks against the light. Like Shanna said, it's a super peaceful spot, so we saw it and we're both very excited about it. More than that, you can see all the potential for composition and the interplay of dark and light. And actually, I often look for a feeling when I'm looking for a location. I know a place kind of when I feel it. It has to have good values, good composition, all of that, but if it has that feeling of tranquility, that's usually how I know I found my spot. Jane! So this is how we find our spots. Our friends find our paintings for us.
Well, she does aspens just like no other.
Thank you, and I didn't pay her to say that. Just a little bit. I'm always looking at the value when I'm looking at paintings, so if I squint down at the scene, I can see a really dark and a really light and the way that it can be composed to lead the viewer's eye through. That's a really good potential painting right there.
Probably do a little bit, move some stuff around a little bit. I'd like to punch some holes through those trees so you get a little bit more background to it. It's just peaceful and beautiful, honestly. It's just gorgeous.
We kind of got away from the crowd this morning. It was a little busy down below, a little warm, so we started up this trail and found this beautiful little spot right here to have lunch, turned around, and here's this amazing little painting sitting right here in the road. We're loving the way the sky is reflecting on the mud puddles from yesterday afternoon, and it just seemed like this is a nice little place. We got some beautiful little wildflowers that are going to use as accents coming in and leading into the painting, and exciting. Just wonderful to be up here with everybody.
We looked back behind us and saw this great spot where the rain just collected in the road and it's reflecting the sky from above, and I think it looks really neat for a painting. So as quick as I can now, I'm just going to get a little block in, get a study going, see if I can get all the darks and lights nailed down, get the whole composition figured out, and we'll see if it'll make for a bigger painting.
My son is an avid fly fisherman, so I thought it'd be a great subject. I've been doing a little painting just to capture some colors and some things. So when I get to that, I'll have all my reference and everything. You know, I love to capture the effect of light in a painting. I'm always fascinated on a two-dimensional surface with colored mud and hairy sticks that you can create an illusion of light. And so I'm really fascinated by that. It's something I've always loved to do. But sometimes the pieces are only just about light, just capturing that beauty of light. That's what's driving this mostly. So I'll build it from there and see where it goes.
Having grown up in the West and being surrounded by this landscape and this lifestyle, I'm excited about the opportunity as an artist to preserve that historical element of the West and the imagery of the West, whether that's the landscape or, you know, I focus a lot on the cowboy lifestyle and ranching lifestyle, so that's important to me to preserve that. That lifestyle is disappearing quickly, and so I want to make sure that it's preserved through my art. And my initial idea, and these ideas can evolve and change over time, but initial idea is I'm thinking of an outfitter on horseback with some pack horses, thinking this is the perfect setting for that. Today I've been out trying to find a location that might be suitable for that type of subject matter and type of scene, and see if we can make that gel with the figures. That's the plan for now, and then you know, once we get in the studio, we'll really start working out the design and combine those elements together and see what comes of it.
So as I was driving into this area, I just was looking up at those mountains, and they're just so beautiful. I love majestic mountains. But then I'm also a sucker for water. So as I crossed this river, I knew that this is where I had to paint because it's got both. So today what I'm doing is mostly just trying to get the color and light relationships. I do worry about composition and stuff a little bit out here when I'm doing my studies, but mostly what I'm interested in is color and light and getting that relationship and just feeling the spirit of the area, responding to the scene. When I take these studies back to the studio, that's when I can really focus on composition and move things around and design the piece in a more interesting way with limited time, with the light changing quickly, that's of secondary concern out here. What I'm mostly concerned about is just capturing the feel of the area, capturing the light, capturing the colors, and just being inspired by nature and being surrounded by all this beauty here. So, and tapping into just that emotional response while I'm out here. So that's what's foremost in my mind while I'm painting.
I love the visual language, and painting provides a way of translating the visual into a meaningful form that expresses how I feel about nature and design, and expresses that in paint. I love to find the designs in nature and then organize those into images that reflect the beauty and the drama, and hopefully inspire my viewers to love those paintings as well.
My name is Yun Wei. I'm a still life painter. So today I'm doing this composition for a large painting, like a 24 by 36. Mark is kind enough to lend me the gun and the knife, so I can use for my photo shoot. I will have a cowboy hat, or maybe over this area. I live in Eastvale, California. And there's a city called Norco just next to my city, and it's an American horse town. I like to see the cowboys and the cowgirls.
Understanding reality and the way that reality works is kind of an important thing to me as an artist. My objective for it isn't just to know it on the level of being able to perfectly capture it, but it's really to understand it and to know how to manipulate things so that I can change colors, shapes, make a lot of editorial changes in a painting, and yet it ultimately comes off as being something that is completely convincing, where the viewer would not know that I've made a lot of those adjustments. I'll be painting on this for the next day or two. If all goes well and I like the color combinations and the sense of atmosphere and the mood that I see, I'm going to transfer a lot of this over to a much larger piece. And I really enjoy the way that form turns, which is why you see me using a lot of pottery in my work. But I also really enjoy just getting the sense of atmosphere and the way that the eye can be moved through a composition, towards a central idea, maybe a resting place for the eye ultimately.
I've done a few skull paintings and thought I would do one here today. I've got this very old bison skull here. Just really wanted to contrast the idea of death with life. So I added the flowers for color and just to give it some life. I really enjoy just contrasts and not only just literal contrasts with dark and light, or light and shadow, thematically just contrasting my ideas, with the cycle of life, so to speak. With death comes new life and rebirth. Typically, my paintings, although they have subject matter, they're not really about the subject per se, they're more about just the light, and how light falls on these objects. And you get this feeling of reality and atmosphere in handling the paint, and maybe even trying to create something that's a little bit beyond reality. More real than real, hopefully.
So I'm to the point now where I'm blocking in the gesture of the figure. I still have this idea that I want this thick turtleneck up kind of over her mouth and her hands kind of holding up on that. But before I get to that point where I get to start designing the drapery, I just gotta make sure the figure is captivating and fluid. And then if I'm happy with that, then I'll start adding the drapery and things like that.
I'm in the middle of doing a series on rodeo clowns. And this one is of the two clowns egging on the bull, come and get us. I used to follow my dad to rodeos around the West as a kid, and I wanted to be the clown. I wanted to go in there and run from the bulls. I can remember there was a movie that I saw when I was in junior high or high school, and it was a picture that they froze of the bull charging him, and you're looking over the shoulder of the clown as the bull's coming at him. And I thought way back then that would be a great piece to draw, paint, or sculpt someday. That's kind of an underlying theme of my work.
One of the reasons that I work from light is I feel my subjects, and I don't have the same relationship with a photo. So if I'm going to do small and work a big sketch, I have to get as much there as possible. But I really do fall in love with my subject. When I see these, they're beautiful, and that beauty is what inspires me to paint them. For me, that's a lot of the excitement, and probably one of the reasons I paint, because I'm very susceptible to what I'm looking at, especially the flowers and the flower in nature. And we've gathered these from gardens, and actually I brought the peonies up with me. I'm totally affected by what I'm painting. I'm in love with my subject matter.
I am very much known as a flower painter. I grow all of my own flowers in my garden. I have over 100 rose bushes and daylilies and peonies and all that kind of stuff. So this morning I went driving around and found a bunch of wildflowers, and lilacs are actually blooming along the roadside. My thought today was to paint just a fun little still life with kind of mountain wildflowers and some roses in the copper. My grandmothers would take me by the hand and walk me along the mountain path at our cabin, and they would help me identify all the wildflowers, the Indian paintbrush and wild geranium and columbines and things like that, and we would pick them and press them in a book and categorize them. That memory of my grandmother's just has stayed with me, and I still have the book where we pressed the flowers. And so for me, this painting flowers is kind of a connection to my grandmother's.
Middle of the day here, and I decided to paint some of these high clouds that were going by. View of the ranch, looking off in this direction, and it's more of a sky study than anything else, just playing with clouds and arrangements. I've always spent a lot of time outdoors throughout my life, and fishing and hiking, camping, things like that, just being in nature. And so this sort of thing kind of comes naturally to me when I started painting. It's what I gravitated towards, and I still like being out here. I spend a lot of time in the studio now also, but painting outdoors like this is still probably my favorite thing.
Trying to capture that distance between the foreground trees and then that distant mountain in the background, especially the snow on top, would make just a great little, I call them eye catchers, something that catches your attention off in the distance or really anywhere in the painting. And so I'm just doing just a small study just to try to capture the colors that I see in the landscape. Overall, in really any of my paintings, I really go after the light and the shadow. I don't really paint things. I paint what's happening to those things in the landscape. In this case, it's that light and shadow in the foreground, the backlighting coming through between the trees, and what happens to that light and shadow as it goes back into the distance.
I came down here to the riverbank, just doing another little color study, really just trying to get a grasp on the lighting and all the different color variations here. The inspiration right now is basically just the lighting. I really love, I'm seeing like so much different color out there. In these vertical tree lines, there's all these blues and purples, so that really caught my eye initially. And then trying to get the effect of that bright sunlight hitting the water, so that really high contrast, brights, how to like simplify all of this chaos and busyness and control it in a way that is manageable for the eye to absorb.
What caught my eye was the energy in the water and the quietness of sort of the distant landscape. So I wanted to kind of have a contrast of the idea of movement and the stillness in the background. I loved that the water was just changing so much. I thought maybe if I stand here for about an hour, I can capture more than one dimension of the water. Kind of get the sky coming in, a little bit of the reflections of the foliage as it's getting lit differently as the sun moves. If I see something, I take out my little trusty viewfinder, and I just hold this, and then I can sense that the darks and the lights are just contrasting nice and close. So I get this little pops of sunlight on the water. So I get this tumbling motion, but I also get these little greens that just come right in. And as soon as I put them in, it feels like the whole thing just comes together and the harmony of the colors kind of start to work. I trust that there's something there. I can't always put it into words like what it is, but once I start painting, I begin to see it.
My choice is obvious. It's this incredibly gorgeous creek, and there's enough variation in the speed of the creek that it's got a lot of interesting reflections right now. I do a lot of moving water. I mean, I do a lot of creeks. When I can get out to the ocean, I paint the ocean. There's something about the transcendent about the movement of water, and just trying to understand that and find a way to get that feeling of movement without over-painting it, to try to get the impression of movement. I think it's just something that's universal that we all understand, so it's a worthy exploration.
I've had people say, don't you ever rest? They see me drawing and painting nearly all the time, and I know I do that. And I really don't think it's an obsession, because I think that every person needs a lens that they can look through the world at and make sense of it, a particular perspective they have on it. And the arts has definitely given me that, because I believe that no matter even in the most trying and challenging of times, that we can find the positive just by looking around and having the mindset that we will find it. And beauty is here in this place. I set up here because of the sound. I set up here because of the moving water, the light, and primarily the openness, the space, and the freedom that I feel while I'm painting. This checks all the boxes when it comes to exciting me about a particular place to create a landscape painting in.
This spot grabbed me a lot because of the sky, but I like this view looking into the river there, the design of those bushes on each side and the way it flows through. But that dramatic sky that's going on is something. We get fairly dramatic skies where we live, but this is kind of special, so I wanted to paint that. I'm kind of bringing this tree over here into the design. If I was to do a larger version, I would want to probably incorporate more on this side of it and just give it a broader feeling, but with this narrow space, I mainly want to focus on this center part and trying to get a feel of that space going through there. And I usually start with a lot of color and simple shapes and keep building up on that. I like to use a lot of paint and get a fairly textural quality to the work. Part of that's impatience, and the other part is just the way I see.
Driving down, there's an old cottonwood tree down there that's quite nice. And with the road coming around, I just thought maybe if I could put a couple of riders in it later on, but just get the feel of it. And then the way the light comes across with the shadows and things really works good. And then this morning with the horses and the landscape and the outdoors, it just always makes for a great Western painting right here in the West. And it's fun being here with all these artists, and we kind of feed off of each other, because a lot of us, we just stay home all the time and work in the studio. But when you can interact with your own kind, I guess you should say, it really helps, because we all kind of think alike. There's a spirit about the outdoors, and a landscape painter or a Western painter, someone who paints outside and feels the elements, makes you more in tune with life, I think.
I couldn't take my eyes off that mountain. Immediately, I love the design of it. So it becomes, that's the focus, and then it's a nice design leading up into the mountain. I always do that. I look for something that just floors me. And then I start to think, okay, how can I make that a painting, and how can I tell that story? Ultimately, I think that's what we are as landscape painters. We're telling the story of what we thought was important. So atmosphere is behind every painting I do, so I want that depth in a painting. So this gave me a focal point that was way off in the distance, And then I just had to figure out how to lead the eye back there. You know, whenever I find a subject that inspires me, then I start thinking about atmosphere, how to create distance in a piece, and also how to design it, and how is the light falling on it. One thing that intrigued me later in the day was this evening light that we have now, much different than noon light or morning light. I purposely came back at the same time the next day so that I'd get that same light. I wanted the mountain to be the focus, so it's bigger in the painting than it is out here. And I'll do that, I'll take the elements out there and just design with them.
I saw this scene. I've actually looked at it a couple of different times a day, but it's facing in a direction that evening just has given really great light. What I was looking at compositionally was the way that the stream angled up towards the peak, and then these oblique, these soft angles of the hills, somewhat of the clouds. It's just kind of all rolling into this area back in the far distance, and it leads your eye back there. It's fun to look at. As far as an emotional connection to a place, there's something about the world, nature, and the colors and the spirit of a land that is kind of hard to define. I think what I'm after is the spirit of the land, the spirit of peace and the world that gives us such a beautiful place to live.
After a full and rewarding day, the artists wrap up for the evening. The following day will bring their works back to life as each continues to block in studies and refine their compositions.
This morning I was driving by and the lights changed quite a bit, but the sun was kind of like lighting up this side of the barn and it just caught my attention. For me, light is everything. I'm just loving all the different color nuances in all this old wood and in the, then the roof and everything like that. So for me, this painting was just all about, again, sort of color and light. Composition-wise, I wish I had a bigger canvas for this, but this is kind of all I had. So I might do some little sketches, some little drawing sketches to come up with some different compositions, and I took a bunch of photos, but I like the way that like this foreground of trees is sitting a little closer and kind of holding that dark shape up, and then we're getting that real far depth on this front side of the barn. It just caught my eye in the morning. I was just driving by and I just had to stop because it's just the light, and it's obviously changed a lot since. Now it's a different kind of beautiful. The light has changed a lot in just like the last hour. We got a thunderstorm rolling in.
Like my wife said, we left the house during that thunderstorm, and everyone else came back to the house, and I like to go in the opposite direction. So it's amazing how after a rainstorm the color is so much more vivid. Beautiful stuff. More subtle but vivid.
I came a day early and this little spot was my favorite. And it's been the favorite all along, and now we're raining and painting in it. So I'm just so excited about it. And this morning I had one of the horse riders come down, and we had the most neat experience with him. He got in there and the reflections were absolutely amazing. So today, what I'm trying to do is capture this S-feel in the water, and I just love it. It's kind of still water, it's kind of off from the main river, and it sits there and has reflections. Of course, right now it's raining, but good. I'm just trying to capture that movement that I see there. So it's a beautiful river, I just love it. The heart of my art is you are creating a piece. And the piece is something that hopefully will give other people hope. that's my desire. You can't judge that, but if it gives me hope and excitement, then I'm hoping it will do it for others.
Drove around, found a really killer spot, and then found myself caught in the middle of a thunderstorm. So I kind of had to retreat and drive into the ranch. Now I've been here about 10 minutes or so, and I found this spot. The rain has sort of let up a little bit, but I saw this scene right here. A minute ago I had really dramatic, beautiful clouds. Those have since disappeared, so I'm gonna have to figure that out. But right now the weather is unpredictable, cold, a little windy, and wet. The idea is paint small, paint something that you can do quick, and hopefully make something out of that.
So right now just working with gesture. The gesture's changed a lot back and forth with her arms, trying to have a juxtaposition of the two forearms that doesn't look awkward and make it interesting and captivating. The trick is once I start getting enough where there's a face, the tendency is to just draw into the face where it's the focal point and just keep on tickling on that and working on that. And I have to really force myself to keep standing back and make sure the whole works together.
Right now I'm just loading the armature. So I've got a aluminum wrapped wire underneath that is flexible, so I can bend and twist and get a gesture that works. And I just build it up little by little. I'm going from the inside out, so I'm kind of looking for the hips and rib cage, just kind of blocking that in. You know, on the inside it's just a matter of putting the head poking out that'll be stuck down inside, but then I can bend and twist the figure. But right now I'm just kind of getting the proportions right.
I remember the water had a lot of light bouncing off it, so there were white rapids and all the glowing little spots you see all the time. Way too much to try to even begin to paint. So I ended up sort of redesigning it, and I did, particularly on the bottom, I created this design of rocks that were in the stream, but I rearranged them a bit, and I eliminated most of the white that was on the rushing stream, and I created a white band of the rapid water that really was very white, cutting across the bottom of the painting. You can see it at the bottom. And that was really the last thing I added to this painting. When you're painting oil paint and you're painting wet into wet, it becomes difficult to not make mud, it's the term we use in this industry. And it was done all brushes, no palette knife work. And I may very well end up doing a painting with that as the environment for probably Native Americans on horses or some old-time cowboys, or ultimately that's probably where it's headed.
So now I see this beautiful bear, and he's just looking at me and holding still much better than any model ever could. I thought, well, why not? We got to paint this guy. But when I see a face I love, I just feel like I have to do it, whether it's sketching with pens or watercolor or oil and trying to do a caricature of what that person is or that animal. And I realized when I do a human head, it's narrow and longer. And I started him like I'd do a human head, and it didn't work because his head is wider. So I had to sketch that on, totally start all over and try and think of it as a grizzly bear.
Back here in the studio, this is the second day for me on this particular painting, and I've just really been enjoying all the thunder, and it's been a blessing to be out of the rain. This piece is starting to come along a little here. What I'm working on today is really getting the sense of negative space, and I'm really developing the values. I've really been working to get this to just kind of have a very secondary role in the painting, developing this here to be more of a central place that the eye rests. From here, I'm getting real close to the point where I need to let the painting dry before I can do too much more to it. So I will probably maybe put in another hour or so into this piece, and then I'll have to call it for a few days.
So I was painting the thunderstorm out this way, and it was spectacular. So you can see how quickly everything changes, because this got really dark and then it was lit up right here, straight out that way. But now it's completely changed. But it almost looked like sunrise or sunset, but it was 9:30. All that thunderstorm stuff is really fun to paint.
One of the things I've loved about Montana is the big sky. So as the clouds have been clearing out, I've been trying some interesting things to kind of capture some of the motion. Of course, the clouds are moving and changing all the time, and some of the original clouds have kind of moved away. It's going to be mostly sky, but I don't want it to just be the clouds that we have, which are kind of flat like this, but something that evokes the energy that I saw before. So I'm going to be looking for something more like some of my other sketches were a little bit like this, where there's a little more activity in the sky, something like that. So I'm going to be trying some things out. I'm pretty confident that I'm going to come up with something.
I'm painting a barn, and the main reason I like painting barns is I like the geometric shapes of a barn and the way they apply to the natural surroundings. And I like playing with kind of an abstract. I love motion, and I put a lot of texture in my paintings, and therefore I'm looking for something that has a lot of elements, but then I can simplify it down to what I need it to be. It's the elements of the light that cause dancing through a painting, and that's what I love to see in it, and that's why I've chosen this part of the composition this way.
When I first got to the ranch, I loved the movement that's up in that little saddle area as it comes down to the cottonwoods. And every day I just keep seeing that scene. But when the light has been beautiful, I've been other places. So I thought, well, I'll just set up and then hope that the sun shines on the element that I wanted it to, would be this little area right in here where the cottonwood is. So I really loved this movement as it goes back and forth. And then the sun came out and illuminated, and I really tried to keep my center of interest right in here. So I didn't drag that lightest light all the way out. I just kept it centered right in here. And then, of course, the clouds had disappeared, but I had made this gesture when I first started of what the clouds were doing. I wanted to make sure there was a little bit of happy blue sky.
As I paint, I'm looking out at all the values that I see here and the colors and just the whole expanse, and I'm just trying to get the feeling I get from the whole area just in this little study. And I'm just laying in the initial washes here now. Drying time with watercolor becomes a problem. When you're plein air painting, you have to wait quite a bit for things to dry. In order to get the blue of the sky, I've had to put on several washes. And when you put on a wash, it's all wet, and the paint runs with the water. So you tip it and try to get even washes, just starting to lay in a little bit of the green in the background. And all this will be filled in with different things eventually, if I can get through it today.
The fish here are so exceptionally pretty. The browns have brilliant red spots on them, and the cutthroats are just fat and and healthy and gorgeous. Yeah, it was fun yesterday and got some great underwater shots. So I'm excited about moving forward with the painting.
Basically what I do, I just start at the bottom of it, start picking apart the close stuff and move my way up through it. They're feeding on the top all by themselves, so fingers crossed this should be good. One just came up right next to that rock on the other side there. That's a nice one there. Oh, and that's a nice, big, pretty cutthroat. And here it goes. Thanks, buddy.
I'm working today on this beautiful valley in Montana. My inspiration for it is basically Lenny and Carol's house in the middle of acres and acres of unspoiled wilderness. This morning we had thunderstorms, now we have bright sun, and that's even part of the painting. The greenness of the valley and the light on all the buildings in the mountains is in large part due to, of course, the weather and the changing conditions. So today I'm working on this composition that the focal point of the composition hasn't been done yet. Lenny and Carol's house, I think, deserves some special treatment, so I'm going to be doing that last. So I've got almost all the valley in now. I want it to look loose because I want there to be a spirit of freedom and energy in the painting. Most meticulous part of it is the house there, and what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to make the style of the house work with the style of the entire painting.
I was actually at the same spot yesterday afternoon. So I must be liking it. It's a good sign when I come back to the same spot again as far as starting to find an environment that I like. I did a quick sketch of the river. Last night I did more of an intimate scene, and today I wanted to kind of step back, create a nice horizon line with these mountains and get a lot more space. And so if I were to use this particular idea, my figures would be smaller within it. It'd be more landscape and a little more grandiose in scale. When I'm outside, I try not to worry about making a finished gallery piece. This is really about studying color and value and light. And then hopefully I can take this back to the studio. I'm going to be combining, the figures and different aspects with photography. So this helps me keep my colors more accurate, my values more accurate, and hopefully bring more life into my studio painting when I get to that point.
So I have returned from location up on the side of a small mountain over here. We had about a 2-mile hike down, and I've set up in some shade so I can actually see the colors I was painting. In the bright sunlight it can be difficult. And I begin adding some wildlife to this little grove of aspen trees. I'll add one more deer, and this will serve as the nucleus for a larger painting that I will do in my studio come August.
That great pine tree had an awesome shadow going across, and I just love the idea of a rider coming through down to get some water at the stream. But I just love the shadow and the color that happened in here. I love the direction of the trees that had fallen pointing to this. So it was fun to design this. Quite excited about it. I like the colors that came out, and it didn't rain on me.
I oftentimes work from memory, and it gives me a lot of freedom, actually. I like to leave a lot of open edges, and a lot of this will be toned down in the final painting, but keeping things sort of abstract in the periphery, and then focusing in on an area that's more realistic, and it just really adds to that feeling of realism. So I think a lot about design and how your eye is like led into the painting. So that it's all kind of an orchestration of shapes and colors and light and shadow.
I was raised on a hunting and outfitting dude ranch. We had about 15,500 acres to take care of, and that's where I first started learning. I started drawing at a very early age and just kept it up for the rest of my life. And I really enjoy what I do, and I work primarily in oil. Currently I'm working on a large project in Yellowstone, and so I'm doing a series of 50 paintings that are located in the backcountry of Yellowstone, and most of them have never been seen before.
Well, there's always an effort to create something that you enjoy, but hopefully other people will too. And I find that I like to try and get a painting that can't be ignored. No one ever took home a painting that they didn't notice. I like to think that it's possible to get a person's attention from across the room, and then as they approach the painting, there's more and more for them to be interested in as you draw them in, and hopefully they're still interested when they're right up next to it.
As I drove into this valley, it just kind of blew me away. It's mesmerizing. And then, you know, the opportunity to see all of these really terrific artists, you know, do their thing, and the opportunity to see them interact among themselves has been a lot of fun. It's a special place with a lot of really great people.
Paint outdoors very often, but when I do, I paint a mountain lion.
Today is the grand opening of Illume Gallery West in the town of Philipsburg, Montana. Artists will showcase masterful works as they open their gallery to collectors who have come to celebrate and revel in the beauty of each exquisite piece of art.
We have enjoyed all of the artists for the last 3 days. We've had about 100 people at the ranch, entertaining while they entertained us, and it was laid back and fun and interesting. And then we all showed up here at the gallery for the grand opening and opened the doors to their gallery, their pieces that are all so quality and so amazing, and they really gave it their best shot. I mean, it's just great. We're covered in red dots inside there, and I'm not surprised.
I do mostly wildlife, both sculpture and painting. I would say wilderness is the theme of my work. For 30 years I've been sculpting and spend a lot of time in the wilderness. My focus has been mainly wild animals and wild places. This is my first time in Philipsburg, and the gallery's beautiful, and I'm just honored to be here. Got a lot of friends, a lot of other artist friends that are in the gallery, and I'm just super impressed. Really happy to see how it all goes.
Everyone, come on in. While we were together, we became, it's a stable of artists. That's what they call a group of artists. And so this stable is now very well acquainted with each other, and they love each other. It's like a family.
So a lot of people ask me how come I, paint a lot of Native American subjects, and I think there's several answers for that. And people ask me that a lot, and I've thought about it a lot. And I think it's because when I was a child, I lived in New Zealand. In fact, I was born in New Zealand, but I always knew I was an American. I always knew I wasn't a Kiwi. And for me, America was about the Old West. America was like cowboys and Indians. In Montana, there's so much Western history, and everywhere I go in Montana, every scene I see, I kind of see Indians. I see a story. Driving along the valley there and the little creek winding around, and as I'm looking over there, I'm like, wow, I can really see a scene. I can see like an Indian tribe, like maybe with travois moving along the creek. That's pretty much where my inspiration comes from.
From the get-go, tonight was like a standing ovation, and even toward the end here, there's still a lot of excitement. So I think it's going to keep going.
With a wealth of inspiration, the artists head home to their studios to create their larger, finished masterpieces.
My studio here in beautiful Prescott, Arizona. I saw this beautiful little dilapidated miner's cabin, very small and pretty run down, but I think there was a kernel of an idea there. So I pulled out my paint box, and I did these 3 compositional sketches. Once I decided that this was the compositional sketch that I wanted to do, I got my paint box out and set it up, and I did this little study here. And I thought, once I put some cowboys in this, this could be really something special. So when I got back to the studio, I did a sketch, added these 3 cowboys. And now with all the prep behind me, I get to the fun part. The painting is all finished. This is called Hot Time in the Old Town Tonight. I'm really happy with how this turned out.
I've returned back from Montana to my studio in Lincoln, Nebraska, and I have a setup behind me right now that is almost monochromatic in nature, and I want to bring more of the Western themed colors into this painting and really develop something that is kind of unique to the West. I think I've reached pretty close to the halfway point on this painting. As I continue to refine this, I'll just be trying to create a sense of harmony amongst all these elements. There's also a really beautiful cast shadow that comes off of the back side of this piece of pottery as well that'll really help connect it to its environment. I'm here to share this finished painting with you now. As far as the frame goes too, I wanted something that was very simple. It's a darker frame, it has a beautiful antiquing to it, but it really helps to extend that sense of negative space from the painting all the way through the frame as well. I've added a few leaves down here just to help create this kind of interesting flow for the eye through the painting here. And I've decided to call the piece, or to title the piece, Grasping Infinity. And that comes largely from this infinity sign that is created by the handle and its cast shadow.
I'm getting ready to start on this 30 by 40 based on my time in Philipsburg. Now I'm ready to take it up big. I'm about maybe 2/3 of the way into this piece here. Main item I want to adjust at this point is this distant section here. I do want to overall lighten that a little bit and calm down and maybe cool down the color a little bit. This is my completed painting titled Golden Summer Evening at Milo Lake. So once this has a chance to dry, I'll be excited to get it all framed up and sent off to Illume Gallery West.
Chosen this canvas size. It's 32 by 40 inches, and I'm just going to lay down a warm wash ground over it, let that dry a little bit, and then go into my drawing. You can tell it's rough at this stage, just blocking in shapes, trying to fit the figures into this composition how I want, and then I'll start laying in thicker paint.
It turned out quite different from the original field study I did, where I got the idea of painting this scene. The intent is to depict the last few minutes of light that I saw that evening. In those last minutes of light, the color really shifts to a warm, rosy, kind of golden color, and so I wanted to depict that. Hopefully the eye travels on an interesting journey through this piece.
What I'm going to go for here is a design on a 30 by 40 canvas. I can have a little bit of contrast with the sort of that stillness that I'm talking about, that quiet, peaceful lake, and all the activity going on the tops of the Anaconda mountain range, where the textures and the crevices and these kind of really interesting shapes kind of convey energy as well as wildness, the wildness of Montana.
Good morning. I just stepped in my studio to see how my underpainting's set up. Yesterday when I left it while it was wet, so I have a place to start and I'm going to get at it. I'm pretty happy with the glow I created in this beautiful Montana sunset. Only thing left to do here, got to sign my painting.
When we were leaving the ranch, I came past a river and there was a group of people on horses and they were cooling themselves off at the river, and it was so fabulous. So I took a bunch of photos. So I'm going to do the combination of different photos to get the layout I want, and the colors that I did on my sketches while I was there, and put them into the big painting.
Now that I'm in the studio, I'm starting to go through my photo references and do these little sketches. This little tiny color study here was done on location in Montana, and that's going to become my main color reference for the final painting. So now that I have kind of where I'm going and have a good feel for the final composition, I can jump into the large painting. Just starting to get going on the drawing here. It still has some tweaks to be made, but for the overall composition, I'm feeling pretty good. This painting is officially finished. I am really happy with the way it came out, and I had a whole lot of fun putting it together.
When I came home to my studio, I was working with a model to try to figure out how to make this pose work. So I'm at that stage right now where what I really need is to find a perfect, large, thick turtleneck sweater. I'm happy with the expression of the figure and the head, but need more work on the hands and how I'm gonna juxtapose the fingers. Just finishing up this piece for Illume Gallery West for our auction. Went from the original sketch that I showed last time. This is the final version of it.
We recently got back from spending time up the Lundgren Ranch and finding beautiful places to paint. It was an all-star list of artists, and we had a really great time. I found a little road that goes up to a lake called Moose Lake, and at the side of the lake there's this beautiful little stream that winds up through the mountains, and this is what I would like to do.
I'm getting ready to start this painting. It's 3624. It'll be based on my study here I did out in Montana. I'm going to incorporate more foreground, more of the dramatic sky that was happening. I want to show that big Montana sky. I've got it, the whole design laid out, got a lot of shapes, color, really got the idea of what I want for the light, my sky, this sort of stormy sky that I was seeing out there when painting. I have added this horse and rider. I think at the moment I feel like that's going to be a good addition. It just seemed like it called out for it. My completed painting, I'm calling it Approaching Storm.
I'm just kind of putting a few little final palette knives here in the grasses. See if we can bring this more to life. And then I think I'll be calling it done. I did open up the door there and put a window back in there to make it so you can look through. And I kind of like that a lot better.
Okay, this is a sculpture I started up in Montana at the gallery opening. I'm doing a series of rodeo clowns, and this is one of the series. Here's two clowns calling over the bowl. We're over here, come get us.
As you can see, I'm totally blank right now. I've got what I think is a really good idea for a painting. I'm going to be relying on, again, that study that I have, the image that I have here, and a lot on my own memory of the scene, which I do remember quite well. I'm going to consider adding some things to this scene, possibly some water in the foreground. We'll see. We'll see how I feel about that as time goes on. Okay, here I am, right around halfway done with this thing, and at the moment I'm trying to resolve this area here. Here's the painting about finished up. I'm really happy with all these fun foreground elements actually, and how they came out. Really like this river. A lot of interesting colors and textures and stuff like that in there, and I'll send it off to the framer here soon and ship it up to Montana.
Hey everybody! So I wanted to point out some differences between this studio piece. I say studio because I'm visiting my daughter in San Diego, so I've actually been doing the finishing parts of this on the road. Was in France for a month, and now we're traveling across the country. So sometimes I have to bring my portable easel to work on studio pieces. So anyway, the main differences between this piece and the original plein air piece is I moved the sun to the other side of the tree.
My son came, and two other guys came, and they were fishing while I was at the ranch. And I had my son come to fish. And so while he was there fishing, just inspired the idea to do a painting of fishermen in the river, utilizing that light. Here's the finished piece. I'm going to title it Work in the Pocket. The frame I chose was a dark frame with a red clay underneath that comes through. I felt like it really pulls out kind of the reds in the painting. It kind of helps pull out that fisherman, that subject matter. So that's why I chose it.
We got the opportunity to go up on the Lundgren Ranch in July. Jane and Mark brought us up there, and we had a blast up there as a family all came together. You know, those are the important things in our lives. Many of us travel the country, and we're painting in events all across the country, but you know, to be able to kind of sit back and just relax for a couple of days and paint this beautiful landscape that you see up there in Montana. Put a little paint on your palette. Where in the world do you think you're gonna go? Ain't nobody pointing no directions. It's up to you to paint one for the show. Folks are sitting home and they're waiting, hoping and waiting just to see this piece of plein air magic that you're making, the one I'm sure they'll buy from you and me. Now don't you think they like the one from Utah? One with pretty mountains all around. Maybe one from Zion or Escalante. Philipsburg's my favorite kind of town. I'll paint the light and hope to find that magic, that special place we all would like to go. I'll paint the light and roam around and ramble, not knowing where in the world we're gonna go. Paint the light and roam around and ramble, not knowing where in the world we're gonna go.
incredible process would be for naught if these exquisite pieces never found a home. Each collector plays an integral part in the creative process by allowing artists to support a livelihood that helps them to paint another day. Join our family by purchasing your masterpiece from Illume Gallery West.